friend, it's a beautiful warm afternoon here in Tel Aviv, and I have the pleasure to welcome Fred Braga to the podcast. Fred is based in Switzerland, in Zug, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And I hear it's nice weather there today.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Wow, amazing. So this is like a free conversation. Life Sciences Today is a channel, it's part of the healthcare IT scene channel. We have a lot of listeners. I've done 5 podcasts in the last 2 weeks, and I have another 10 stacked up by the end of July. So it's getting really, really popular. And we talk to people doing advanced things in life science. So it's kind of on the continuum between digital health, drug discovery, drug targeting, and of course clinical trials, which is close to my heart. And so this is a good time to just welcome Fred to the show and ask you, Fred, tell us what you're doing at Debiopharm.
Yeah. Thanks, Danny. Pleasure to be in. Honored by the invite. At Debiopharm, I'm responsible for what we call digital and IT, but also now bioinformatics. We're responsible for the digital transformation of Debiopharm, moving from a company that was primarily outsourcing all of its clinical research and development activities into world where we mostly try to do things in-house because we realize that our product is also our data, and we need to know more and more about the data that we generate through these clinical trials, and even before we start them, to have really good, solid products.
Amazing. So that actually ties into something which I've been hearing, a theme which we were talking a lot about with our customers the past few years, and something I heard repeatedly from a number of biotechs, which will hold your breath. We'll come to that in a second. Next question is, how do you create value for your customer? Who is your customer? I assume your customer is an internal customer inside of Debiopharm.
Yeah, so us personally, and us collectively at Debiopharm, and me personally, so we talk about the 4 Ps. So the payer, the provider, the physician, and the patient. Yeah, so these are that's our focus, is these 4 Ps. But for us, the value creation is, we in the digital team, we're extremely focused. My boss is the CFO, so he's extremely focused on value, and we want to have a maximum amount of value for every Swiss franc that we invest. And what we do is, very simplistically, we look at, are we reducing with this activity, project, investment? Are we reducing cycle times? Are we reducing risk for the study? Or are we reducing the cost? And clinical trials are extremely expensive, as you know. I mean, for us, we do mostly phase 1 and phase 2 studies. So, of course, the cost per patient has completely skyrocketed in the last 10 years. I think we're talking tenfold increase in cost per patient. And it's absolutely critical for us to measure this value in a way that it's translatable to the investment that we make versus the amount of studies that we can run.
Sure, of course. Of course. Now, now part of that value creation, I think, is something which I noticed. I started noticing that with some of our customers a couple of years ago, which is that it's surprising how little biotech companies do with the data that they have and do actual machine learning and do, more interesting things. So they're collecting a lot of data. Actually, at the end of the day, it's not that much data. It's not big data, but you're still collecting data, but you're spending an incredible amount of money to collect the data, and you're spending an incredible amount of money to clean the data. And then it's been really strange how few companies really realize, just like you said a second ago, that your data is your IP. And we were telling this, we were preaching this idea to our customers for a long time. And then we started hearing this from customers. We started hearing from a West Coast biotech that said, yeah, our data is our IP. You think I'm going to let a CRO do the project for us? No. So he has his own internal CRO. And we started seeing that more and more. As a matter of fact, the entire medical device industry, they basically run their own trials. So that's sort of a model which I first heard. I don't know if you know this expression. Someone told me that it's called the Novo Nordisk model. That apparently Novo Nordisk was the first one to bring the CRO operation in-house. I don't know.
Yeah, I do because I worked for Novo Nordisk. So, so
Oh, hey, so you know the Novo Nordisk model.
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think um, in general, outsourcing is fantastic, right? So it gives the opportunity for smaller companies to leverage the experience and the breadth of knowledge of CROs. So I think CROs have played a massive role in the industry and have been great catalysts for development and providing access to smaller companies to do drug development. Um, we are investing heavily now on a hybrid model between FSO, so full service outsourcing, and functional service provider, FSP. And what we realize, I mean, the journey has been that, 10 years ago, Debiopharm was outsourcing everything and as a small biotech. And we increasingly, either because we wanted more insights into the data, we were just getting reports, or so either by our own determination or via some regulatory requirements of study oversights, we have been pushed more and more into a setup where we realize, well, we can't outsource the problem. We have to outsource the activities that make sense. So we have to take this on us, and we are implementing, for example now, a clinical trial management system, for our clinic to get more oversight and control over our clinical trials and enable these outsourcing models. So it's kind of different type of outsourcing that we're looking into. And in terms of the data, you're absolutely right. Our second big initiative this year and next year, and for the past 2 years, has been something which we call the Debiopharm Data Fabric, where we've built together like the entire pipelining of data between us and our what we call data providers, could be CROs or other parties, where we've essentially set up a system and a process by which all the data that we get from everyone, and it starts to get a lot. We start to get also a lot into big data. We get a lot of transcriptomics data, for example,
Mhm.
that we increasingly use in our studies. And all of this ends up in one single place. And now we are implementing the next step of that, which is what we call our metadata repositories. But essentially, it is just a way for us to say, these are our data standards. We define them. And this is mostly valid for preclinical, because in clinical, we have standards like CDISC, which are
Mhm.
widely accepted, fortunately. Sometimes I'm a bit provocative and I say that actually regulators have been the biggest driver for innovation in our industry, because in reality, a lot of the innovation that has happened in our industry comes from regulators. And for example, the FDA in 2012, 13, something like that, saying, no, sorry, we only accept submissions in CDISC format by now. So this has, had massive benefits to the entire industry, in my opinion, and we need more of those. So we don't have them for preclinical, so we are investing in creating these standards and really building that data fabric. So our vision is that as data is generated in a continuum, we have all the pipelines, all the processes, all the tools that allow us to, in real time, generate all the analytics that the decision makers, the medical doctors that are doing medical data reviews, or the clinical, the biologists and the chemists that are doing the drug discovery and the targeting, etc., that in real time they can make decisions and make changes to their protocols, create new scientific hypotheses, and iterate over the discovery and development process. And I'd say we're not that far from that. I think 2020 we already see some parts of that in action today. And other parts, the full vision, I think we will be able to realize by 2026, 2027.
That's a great vision, and I think that my sense on C-disk was is that if we didn't have C-disk, the situation would be a mess. It would be even worse than today. But on the other hand, when you look at C-dash, which are variable namings, is kind of loose, and I'm sure that you're doing this project. As you do the project, you see how gnarly a problem this is to actually get meaning out of the protocol and correlate that with the data dictionary. That's I'm
Mhm.
curious how you're solving that problem.
So, on the clinical world, we still have a very, at the moment, we um, solve that problem within biostats. So the biostats teams have immense amount of work to do that, say very ad hoc, case by case. In the preclinical world, we start now implementing this MDR, and we create our own variables, we create our own data standards. We've also developed an AI-based solution in our MDR, which we decided to develop internally, which where the scientists just upload a protocol and the tool automatically recommends all the variables that should be used for that study. So
Oh,
the scientists, and it recommends both that exists variables that exist in global standards like CDISC, because there are obviously some standards for preclinical, especially for DMPK studies, but also our own variables, and it searches the literature and recommends even design updates to the study and new data that should be collected as part of that study.
that's awesome. It sounds like you're very close to the Holy Grail, which is a good place to be.
We can almost touch it.
Can almost touch it, but that's the Holy Grail. I wanted our readers to know that what Fred is talking about is been for a long time considered the Holy Grail of clinical trials, right?
Yeah, that's true, because it's incredible. Like today, in most companies, most people that I talk to, and I mean, especially in preclinical and translational medicine groups, where the standards is non-existent. Every time I ask, "So how do you compare data between experiments in the same study?" And people are not able to do that,
Yeah,
let alone between studies. And what we're going to be at is I think in 2 years, and this is what I communicate a lot to my teams, is imagine a world where in 10 years, the legacy that we leave behind to the people that come to do research after us, where they can have access to all our research data for the last 10 years at the click of the button. They don't have to go and search for the data. They don't have to clean it. They don't have to normalize it. They don't have to do any of that. And that difference, because it's exponential difference in speed of access to intelligible data, that I think is groundbreaking. And especially with AI, right, where you will have a lot more easiness in making the analysis.
that's right.
Um, that's fundamental shift here.
It's a fundamental shift, and it's a tremendous amount of value that you're creating for your own organization. And it's refreshing to hear someone who decided to take this gnarly problem and to work on it, And I really, applause to you.
Thank you. Yeah, the whole team is working. Actually, it started before I joined Debiopharm, which was about 2.5 years ago. There was a vision to create this data repository coming out of need, and now we're taking it, into these three steps. First, the central data repository, which we already have. We have data providers, everything centralized. That's just the pipelines. Now we go into the tabular data and to the variable definition. That's our MDR. The next step is what we call our CDW, but that's for us more, we're still defining what that is. So we're also very practical and very focused on what we implement. And we don't go about starting a project before it's very well defined what we want. And to be honest, I don't think everyone knows exactly what they want out of that, but it's going more it's going more in a direction which I call conversational analytics. It's using the power of LLMs and using this normalized data and then bringing them together to allow people to talk with the data, use these systems as sparring partners to analyze data and to explore hypotheses and to just build new approaches to scientific research. And that's where we kind of see the next step of that beyond 2026
That's
with
that's
that.
uh that's a great vision. It's a very, very important mission also, and I think that it's a mission which is worthy for your company, and it's sort of like a good example for a lot of other people.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
starts with that deep understanding that your data is your IP. And
absolutely. And one of the biggest, let's say, one of the things there is missing in the industry in this space I see is the incentive to share data, right? No, there's no incentive system, and I think there's a very Charlie Munger who said, "Show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome," right? So, if there is no incentive for companies to share their research data or their clinical data, because a lot of it could be shared, and these standards are fundamental for that, there is no there is no data sharing. I mean, it's still puzzling to me in our industry, and I think, personal opinion, a bit immoral that companies are not even allowed to share their research data. I worked for a company called Medidata. I'm sure you've heard
yeah,
about
sure, of
Medidata.
course.
You know, everyone knows Medidata. And I worked on one of uh, uh, the first actual synthetic control arm project. So this was about reusing data, so patient clinical trial data from other sponsors to generate a synthetical control arm for a new study. And when you think about that, and you think that it costs us around between 100,000 and 1 million per patient today for to enroll a patient in a study. And this data that is generated from this patient is not reusable because it's
Yeah.
not allowed, not even allowed to share it in some cases. Yeah. And for me, it's a bit the opposite. I mean, it's almost immoral that we should buy, everyone should be forced and there should be an incentive system, or at least that incentive system should be created to allow companies to share this research data of the patient. And if I was a patient in a clinical study, my dad passed away 2 years ago with AML. He was enrolling in a study. I'm pretty sure that he would love that, the data that is generated from the research
Of
that is
course.
would be shared not just for one company to do the one research on one product, but for the entire industry to evolve and develop faster. And so um, we hope that this future comes. It doesn't depend just on us. I think people like you are important to also push for this change with regulators, and these forums are important to say, let's get sponsors and research companies to share their clinical trial data. And so we want to also be ready for that, right? To be able to ingest data at high speeds and with um, um, in a way that allows us to really move fast with the research.
That's really very important. But I think, even before you share data, it's important for internally inside of Debiopharm to have the data in a way that you can understand the protocol, you can cross different things, you can automate all kinds of tasks like, data review. So if you can automate these things, you have tremendous wins in terms of speed, in terms of reuse of data, in terms of reuse of, your insights. But you can't do that unless you have the stuff normalized and in a way that means something, right? So
Absolutely.
so you're creating tremendous value inside the company, that's for sure. So my next question to you really is kind of a strange question in this situation, which I always ask my guests on the show, which is how do you capture this value for the company? In other words, how do you bring it back into and bring value in? It's kind of a tricky question in this case, maybe, but I'm going to throw it at you anyhow.
Yeah, great. I think so. Our business model is uh, to in-license molecules from academia or other uh, companies to do the early, to do the preclinical and early development, so phase one, phase two. Um, how do we capture the value of this? Well, first, um, we are faster in developing our products. We have more insights, so it's quite, I would say it would be, so we reduce the risk. So because it would be quite easy to imagine that you lose perspective on the data that you have if you don't have the right insights, and that you make wrong decisions about your product. That I think we all accept that we are all the time making wrong decisions
Yeah,
or not the right decision.
that's right.
And so that's there's already so much that we don't know about biology, etc., that there's already an inherent risk factor that is almost 80% sure that we're making mistakes with every decision. So if we can create visibility about what we know, at least the other 20% that is in our data, etc., so we reduce that risk. And I think this is how we create value for the organization, for the patients as well. We are also a company that is by nature extremely reliant on the collaboration with early research units. So we want to provide also a top experience to the investigators that are collaborating with us, and we have really fantastic collaborations with a lot of early phase units in Switzerland, but also outside. And yeah, providing all these things and being a very data focused and data centric company, I think puts us in a great spot. I give you an example. We are running a phase 1/2 study on GBM, which for which we used a synthetic control arm, super innovative design. So, and for that, it was, one of the main centers was here, the Universitätsspital in Zurich. Their recruitment rates for this study were off the charts. We could recruit so fast because every patient that was enrolling in the study, and the investigator knew that you're going to be on the intervention arm. You're not, we don't have a control arm. They're using a synthetic control arm for this study. So imagine, and if you really believe in the product or in the molecule that we're developing, that's fantastic, right? So for the patients, for the investigators. And so these are the kinds of things that are big investments on our side, that are big pushes, that are risks associated with it. But as an agile company that we are, innovative, we can take these risks. And all of this obviously is only possible because we have all this infrastructure and mindset to move forward with those risks.
That's a very refreshing way of looking at it. When you talk to to pharma biotech companies, they're usually talking a lot about what they're doing. They talk less about the data platforms, but I'm hearing more and more of that from tech bio companies that I talk to because they're coming at it from a data perspective, which is what you're doing. I guess my thought that kind of popped out to me just a second ago was that you license molecules that you develop after the phase one stage. Maybe you could charge for the data platform also. So you're like selling a hardware product or a wetware product, I guess. You're selling a biological product, but you're also maybe you could also monetize the data platform. Have you ever thought about that?
That's a very interesting thought, um, particularly in light of some of the products that we are developing. So let's say, everybody talks about platforms and technology when you're developing a new molecule. We have this platform that does this. But some of the new studies that we are investing in are in the ADC space, so antibody drug conjugates. And all of these essentially linking an antibody with a cytotoxic payload to target the cancer cell, right? And there's huge promise in this area of research. But the secret sauce in that mix is what they call the linking technologies, because it's extremely hard to link the cytotoxic payload with the antibody. And
Right.
so our big differentiator as Debiopharm is that we actually have a research unit that does lab research in Martigny. And we have our development teams, biology, mostly in Lausanne. And part of my team, one big thing that we're doing is we're actually bringing these teams to work together and with digital workflows, working on the same data sets, processes, tools, metadata, everything to collaborate in a way where we're much faster doing this targeting for ADCs. And all of the data that we generate from the ELN, from the lab notebooks to the experiments, to the actual clinical data, we
Hmm.
can bring it all together under one arm. And so it's seamless for our people to actually do interrogate the data sets all across from the beginning. And with I think especially because the secret sauce becomes in the linking. When we out license, it's not just like out licensing this product. I mean, the technology that goes with the out licensing is the key, and how you actually get to that innovation, how you actually were able to create this product might be in the future something that our partners to whom we out-license might be interested in, and not just
Yeah.
the product itself. So it's a great point that you make, actually.
Yeah, it could be some tremendous upside for you. As a matter of fact, someone asked me the other day, someone who's not from the industry said something about, I was talking about the people I interview on the podcast I host. And he said, well, how can they do that? I said, I want you to know that today biotech companies are software companies and they're doing so much. And I gave him a few examples. So yeah, that's probably going to be an interesting upside if you go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, in our team, in my team, we have I'm myself a software engineer. We have data scientists, other software engineers. And I think the key thing is that we try to solve problems, and most pharma companies, they have a lot of scientists, right? And these are fantastic, great people. But in my view, we need to mix a bit the scientific way of thinking with the engineering way of thinking.
Exactly.
Be- Because you can, it's great if you can generate the result once, and maybe you're going to have a lot of effort to generate that result, but you need to, if you really want to scale it, you need to create a replicable, economically feasible way to replicate this result, right? So that's a lot of how engineers are equipped to think, and
So
yeah, we're hard.
that's how you and I think, right? We think like that. We think
Yeah,
about
and so
cases and in reliable software we think about. Yeah.
yeah, we bring these two worlds together. We have also fantastic culture, which allows us to collaborate in a super enjoyable way, and we get a huge kick out of it. So that's great.
It sounds like you're having fun. I'll end the show actually for our listeners, which has now become kind of a standard kind of question for a closer, which is kind of like an interview question. When you interview for a job, people they always have this, where do you want to be in 5 years, Denny? And so
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you the 5 year question. I'll say, what are the three things you want to do in the next 12 months?
Um, Next 12 months. I mean, we have very specific roadmap things that we want to develop. We want to deliver on some key projects. The three things, the first one is delivering our clinical trial management system. So we want to be independent, managing the clinical trial and be able to adopt these FSP models. The second one is getting good at omics data ingestion and analysis to be able to do something which we're investing massively on, which is biomarker identification using AI.
Mhm.
We have a partnership with a company called Genialis, which is also part of our portfolio of companies. So we have also a digital investment fund. A lot of pharma companies are doing this now, but I think we were pioneering doing that, where we invest in digital health startups. And Genialis is one of those companies, which is also building a model of biology for DNA damage repair for us. So it implies that we also have a transformation internally in using omics data and leveraging it for biomarker discovery. So that's number two. And number three is just delivering on our data fabric, delivering on our MDR, the vision that I was talking about earlier. So the next 12 months have to do that. in parallel, we are a small company, so I also have to do a lot of, bread and butter kind of things, delivering on some compliance projects and things of that nature. But that comes
Yeah.
with the job,
I
and
know.
it's also important to do, of course, right?
I know what it's like. I worked for Intel for 7 years, and at Intel, people would say there was part of Intel culture is that you have to meet your objectives, even if you have innovative ideas that you're working on. So if you're working on innovation, that's fine, that's great, but you still have to meet 80% of your objectives for the quarter.
Yeah.
And it doesn't count. You can't come to your boss and say, or to the organization in Intel and say, "Oh, look at the innovative project I did." And in the meantime, you scored 65 on your objectives, right? You can't do that. First of all, you have to execute your objectives. And if you want to innovate, then innovate by all means. But it can't be at the expense of the core work, which, like you said, your bread and butter. And we know that totally. There's a lot of bread and butter to be done.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we can be agile, we can reprioritize. So my whole team, myself, we manage a lot based on OKRs. And what is important is that you're making these decisions consciously. So like I can say like, all right, let's stop the bread and butter project and let's now work on this other project. But we're all consciously making this decision, not just me, but all of us consciously making a decision to put this one on pause, come back next year or in 3 or 6 months, but we're going to do this innovative project, for example, or the other way around, it doesn't matter. But this visibility and alignment on what everybody should be working on, which is shared across the organization. I think that's super important. Yeah.
It's super important. It sounds like it's part of your corporate culture, which is really important.
Yeah.
So, this is a great time to thank you so much, Fred, for being on the show. It's super interesting for me, and thanks for Felicia for quarterbacking this. It's just so good to do it. It's been really super interesting for me. I'm Danny Lieberman. I'm the host of Life Sciences Today. We host people doing groundbreaking, innovative work. Sometimes it looks like low-level work, but innovative work in the field, like what you guys are doing with your data fabric. And look for us. We're on all the major podcast channels on YouTube and on Apple and Google, and of course, you know, um, you can search for us on the web. And we'll be publishing this in about 2 weeks. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Danny. Have a great day.